We have two more videos to go in this series on the kingdom of heaven. And I want to remind you that last time we talked about how Jesus, in approaching the cross, submitted his flesh to the will of God. And in his resurrection, his spirit and body overcome death. This is where the rubber hits the road of being a citizen of the kingdom. Now, Jesus submits his body to the will of God, and in doing so, his body becomes a tool for the good work that he has before him. His body is transformed into something more than just flesh and blood. His whole person is unified in purpose. What his spirit prompts him to do, his body actually does. Of course, it's not the only time that this happens in his life. The cross and the resurrection are not the only moments in Jesus' life where his body and his spirit are unified. In fact, his entire life is built around doing the will of God. His body and its actions are always in total unity with his spirit and his intentions. It's in his death and resurrection, though, that he gives us the opportunity to put ourselves into unity with God's will. He gives us a helper, the Spirit, to guide us to consistency in our devotion to God internally and externally. We accept the baptism out of faith in Christ and his ability to transform us, body and spirit, into a single, unified soul. Let's read Jesus' words in Matthew chapter 25, starting in verse 31. This is the final one in a series of parables about the kingdom. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right, but the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, again the sheep, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundations of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me." Now, of course, if we look at what comes right after this passage, we find that Jesus tells the other portion of the crowd, the goats, that they failed to do any of these things for him, and for this reason will be turned away from his kingdom. Those who did these things receive the kingdom, and those who didn't do not. I want you to notice something, though, that the sheep are surprised by Jesus' statement about their care for him. Now, it's not because they are surprised to have been doing these kind of works, but specifically they are surprised to have done it for Jesus. These good works are natural to them, obvious even. Living their lives in step with the Spirit has restored their bodies, their actions, to the purpose God made them for in the first place. Remember, in Genesis, more than one human is made so that one human being can serve the other. Human beings serve one another, and in doing so, they fulfill the will of God. That's citizenship in the kingdom. It is people in community serving one another because it's the natural thing to do, rather than people severing community to serve themselves. And if we allow the Spirit of God living in us to conform our bodies to his will, we can't help but live for other people. I love you, and my prayer for you today is that God's Spirit would be so powerfully alive in you that you find it guiding your motivation your every action, that when the king returns to sit among his people, you might be surprised to find the full extent of the ways you've done his will.